Welcome to Carib Money Report. I am Kimberly Ramkalawan. We begin this week's episode with impositions affecting the region, from U.S. tariffs to the EU's clampdown on islands engaged in CBI programs. To get a better understanding of CARICOM's response and the implications, we speak to Senior Economics Lecturer Dr. Samuel Braithwaite. We also take a peep at the 2025 edition of Expo Jamaica, while we head to Guyana for our This Week in History segment. All this and more in this week's episode. Our In the News segment is packed this week, covering how the latest tariffs announced will impact trade in the region, including what some islands are planning to do to bolster trade with new and existing partners outside of the United States. With Caribbean nations dependent on imports coming through the United States, current chair of CARICOM Barbados Prime Minister Mia Motley is urging regional counterparts to diversify their markets outside the traditional and long-held US-based ones.
First, we must re-engage urgently, directly, and at the highest possible level with our friends in the United States of America. There is an obvious truth which has to be confronted by both sides. That truth is that these small and micro-states of the Caribbean do not in any way or in any sector enjoy a greater degree of financial benefit in the balance of trade than does the United States. We must build our ties with Africa, Central and Latin America, and renew those ties with some of our older partners around the world, in the United Kingdom and Europe, in Canada. We must not rely solely on one or two markets. We need to be able to sell our Caribbean goods to a wider, more stable global market.
Her solution? A call to rally the private sector in the region under CARICOM to work collectively and to negotiate partners moving forward.
We could lower our tariffs to zero in CARICOM, and it will not make a lick of difference because our economies are small and vulnerable. We suggest that the region take steps to sustain the tourism industry, as likely worsening conditions in many of our source markets will have negative impacts on people's ability to travel. We call on our regional private sector and the tourism sector to come together and to work with governments to collaborate for an immediate tourism strategy to ensure that we maintain market share numbers as a region.
Several Caribbean islands could face visa revocation from the EU for their citizen by investment programs. On March 28, the European Parliament's Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs voted to approve amendments to EU visa regulations. The vote, 41-10, targets Caribbean nations Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia for their CBI programs. Anyone who is a passport holder for any of these countries means having visa-free access to the Schengen area, which encompasses 29 European countries. The amendments aim to prevent these programs from being used to bypass standard EU security and migration controls. In its report, the European Commission says visa-free travel should not be used to bring in investors by offering citizenship. It's a double whammy for some islands, as the United States has signaled similar plans to other nations, while it also intends to offer a US $5 million golden passport to the wealthy. Countries looking to avoid being penalized are urged to up their due diligence checks. The manner in which small island developing states approach climate financing and projects was the primary focus of the third Caribbean Nationally Determined Contribution Finance Initiative Investment Forum and Marketplace held in Grenada this week. Derek Gibbs, climate finance specialist at the CDB, says the challenge lies in creating bankable projects that institutions could get behind, all while supporting climate resilient actions.
Because we recognize that a lot of work, upskill work, needs to be done to be able to develop those strong projects that can then seek financing. And these will not be only CDB's own funded projects that we will support, but these will also be projects that countries may want to take to a GCF or to an AF.
According to EU Representative Luca Trincheri, Critical to getting the right type of investment into climate actions depends on showing the societal value to the business community.
Our strategy to advance sustainable and clean investments across the world gives us new ways to ensure that finance, expertise, innovation flow where they are needed the most. We're now trying to expand natural positive investments that can prove that businesses can contribute to preserve and protect biodiversity. We've heard before how important it is to go beyond the concept that climate action is expensive. And I think to help pass this message is important to ensure that we have the whole society participating into this efforts.
It gives me great pleasure and pride to open Expo 2025.
Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness signaling the opening of Expo Jamaica 2025. The B2B conference, hosted at its National Arena and Indoor Sports Centre, saw over 884 regional and international buyers with some 250 exhibits showcasing over 5,000 local products. A sign Jamaica's Prime Minister says reflects the country's growing global influence and appeal, to which he gave prospective investors a slew of incentives rolled out recently following its national budget.
Businesses investing in productive assets between now and December 2026 will benefit from unprecedented tax advantages, significantly reducing costs and stimulating investments in buildings, plant, machinery, and technology. I urge you, if you are thinking about doing your investment in 5 years' time, bring it forward and take advantage of the incentives that we have given.
While the Expo sees several international trading partners, the Jamaican government sought to give assurances on how it intends to tackle the ripple effects arising from the United States global tariffs.
We took the last trip I made with business people and they pay their fares. I took 73 to Guyana in one time, another 61 another time, and they pay their fares, only 5 or 6 government people. So when you got the numbers for the expenses, so how low it was, Tony, you couldn't even say anything, not true. So now that we're in a place where trading and tariffs are different, we have been preparing the road for our own people. Now our business people know where to go, and we're going to make sure they go to new markets because the world is changing and Jamaica is ready.
Similarly, Prime Minister Holness shared his government's plans at handling the latest in trade impositions with a recalibration of government policies.
We are actively engaging with the United States Trade Representative and other relevant authorities to seek urgent clarification. We are also conducting a detailed technical assessment in collaboration with relevant ministries and agencies to fully understand the scope of these tariffs and their implications for Jamaica's trade and industrial policy. It is important to emphasize that these developments do not reflect any erosion in the long-standing and strong bilateral relationship between Jamaica and the United States. Rather, it reflects a broader recalibration of U.S. trade policy that is global in scope.
Carib Money Report has you covered. We take a break now. When we return, we chat with Senior Economics Lecturer Dr. Samuel Braithwaite to get a better idea of what these reciprocal taxes could mean to CARICOM member states.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Welcome back to Carib Money Report. We are now joined with Dr. Samuel Braithwaite, Senior Lecturer at the Department of Economics at UWI Mona Campus via Zoom. Good day and welcome, Dr. Braithwaite. We want to get right to the matter. We understand implications of the tariffs. However, do you see any room for any negotiations on whether the Caribbean Basin Initiative could still be effective in favor for the region?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. Now, I take your point in us using current structures to deal with the tariffs put on all of our economies, I should say, by the Trump administration. But I think we need to take a step back. The first thing we have to recognize is that what happened last Wednesday was completely flawed. And by the way, I'm not talking here about the right of the Trump administration to do things to help the American people. I'm not talking about that. All I'm saying is the formula we saw is completely ridiculous. Let me give you an example. In 2023, Guyana exported to the United States $3.4 billion worth of merchandise goods. So I'm not talking about services here, goods. And in terms of imports, Guyana imported $1.6 billion worth of goods. If you look at Jamaica, Jamaica imported 3.1 billion and Jamaica exported 700 million. So last Wednesday when I saw the numbers, here it is, you're putting a 38% tariff on Guyana, Jamaica only 10%. Likewise for Trinidad and Tobago, as I understand, it's also 10%. Interestingly enough, which makes it even more ridiculous, Trinidad's exports in 2023, merchandise exports, amounts to $11.7 billion. And in terms of imports, it is $7.13 billion. So how is it that for Guyana, you can attach 38%, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, 10%? The problem is the formula makes no sense. Now, when it comes to tariff policy, nothing is fundamentally wrong about having a tariff per se, Yes, but it has to be carefully worked out. And that is where the Trump administration has failed, because if they were to properly work through various tariffs for every country in the world, Trump would end his presidency and they would still be doing those calculations. It's a tedious, time-consuming task. So in order to be expedient, someone, maybe they use artificial intelligence or something, they arrived at this formula so that he can go on television and talk to the world, as the king, and say to everyone in every corner of the globe, these are the tariffs that we're going to put on you, simply based on differences in exports and imports. So for me, what do our governments have to do? You mentioned the CBI. Because the formula is so flawed, yes, we can't take it seriously. Of course, our governments have to now engage with the Trump administration, yes, or more specifically, the trade experts in the United States, and try to make sense of what is going to happen. In terms of our exporters, our businesses in the Caribbean, what we need to do, or what they need to do, is to speak to the people they supply goods to in the United States and find out from them how this thing can work, what are their concerns and the like. Because we must remember, how a tariff works is like this. When a Trinidadian company sends products abroad to the United States and a tariff is put on that product, it is not the company from Trinidad and Tobago which pays that tariff, It is the company in the United States importing that product that then pays the tariff over to the US government. Yes?
Yeah.
That company importing the product from Trinidad and Tobago then decides how much of that increased cost to pass on to their consumers. You see?
CARICOM chair and Barbados Prime Minister said that they're looking at talks, but do you see this being feasible in any way?
People in the diaspora and their friends like Caribbean products, and they buy them because of that cultural connection to the Caribbean. You see? So I am not worried at this juncture about the market for our products, again, because of that cultural connection, that authentic product from Trinidad and Tobago, that authentic product from Jamaica. Yes? Because remember too, we're not talking here about cars, we're not exporting cars to the United States. We're exporting, spices and so on, things which, by and large, do not make up a big chunk of people's budgets. Yes, so I'm not concerned, but I'm happy to hear Prime Minister Mia Mottley coming out and making a statement, because at this time, you want to bring assurance, you want to bring hope to the Caribbean to say, look, we understand what you're facing, we understand your concerns, we understand that you're worried, but look, we are looking at this thing and we will do the best we can to alleviate the situation. Important point to note. If we go back to the first Trump administration, Trump fought against the World Trade Organization, an organization created 30 years ago to facilitate free and fair trade. And they have a mechanism in place, which, by the way, Trump has effectively dismantled. That mechanism is called the dispute resolution mechanism. So if the Trump administration has some serious issues with a particular trade partner, we have an infrastructure in place, the World Trade Organization, where he could have taken his grievances. And in fact, if you look at how other countries are responding, some of them who decide that they're going to retaliate, it is my understanding that they're doing so within the framework of the World Trade Organization. Because guess what? If a country breaks agreements that they sign in the WTO, the aggrieved party is allowed to impose tariffs or whatever sanctions on the country that breached the rules. You see? So we have true retaliation happening. And I must say, though, retaliation is not something I necessarily recommend.
But when it comes to the World Trade Organization, they've not really worked in the Caribbean's favor. I mean, the CBI was implemented, and it said that it goes against at least two of some of the policies that the World Trade Organization has. So I don't think Caribbean nations have the option of going before the WTO. They're hoping that good faith will be exercised by the U.S. with regards in honoring the CBI.
Well, let me say this, we've got to be very careful. The World Trade Organization does actually allow for various regions to have regional agreements. In fact, if you go back to 1986, when you had maybe a handful, maybe less than 20 regional trade agreements, and if you look at the state of play now, it's what, over 200 or thereabout various agreements, regional agreements. So the WTO, as I understand it, doesn't have a problem with the Caribbean Basin Initiative. So in other words, something like the Caribbean Basin Initiative must provide benefits to countries above and beyond what being a member of the World Trade Organization already provides. So for example, CARICOM, our leaders in the Caribbean have recognized that yes, in this globalized world we're in, it is best for us to diversify the places to which we export and import products from. So in the event that there's something wrong in one place, there is food security, there's national security for your people. But we've got to be very careful though, So if you look at Africa, yes, we have an issue there about the transportation. So for example, if I wanted to fly from Jamaica to Ghana, for example, I would have to go through the United States. There's no straight flight. And I'm not complaining that there's no straight flight. There's no straight flight from the Caribbean, from Barbados or anywhere, even though I know there was some talk about that. But we don't have the population size, right, for airlines to service this region in that way. So it makes sense to say, okay, you go through Hartfield, Jackson, and Atlanta, and you make your way onto West Africa or something like that, right? When it comes to shipping, maybe we can see some movement there, because a ship can, come across, drop off goods one place and then move on to the United States or what have you. Yes. But as I understand it, Africa traditionally, most of the trade would be going towards Europe as opposed to coming across the Atlantic.
Looking at markets outside of that, within the Latin American region, how do you see it benefiting CARICOM nations and third-party trade?
You know, for me, building relationships with our brothers in Latin America is an obvious thing that we need to do, yes? But it takes time to build those relationships, especially when we have, for example, the language barrier, right? On top of that, I don't know how many Caribbean people from the Caribbean diaspora reside in those spaces, yes? And so it makes it difficult, not impossible. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was at a seminar here in Kingston. I'm in Kingston, Jamaica. And one of the presenters noted, if I remember clearly, he was from Peru. And he noted that in Peru, they know about Bob Marley. Yes? So one of the ways we can break into those spaces is to use our Caribbean heroes, or the Bob Marleys, Usain Bolts, you name it. Right? Perhaps Brian Lara too, I'm not sure. Even though I heard recently that cricket is booming in Brazil. You see? So it is through the Caribbean culture, yes, that I think we stand a good chance to make some inroads into those areas.
Or final thoughts for today?
So my final thoughts. If Trump were to say that he's going to make a mountain move, he's going to move one mountain, the Pacaraimos from Guyana, and put it in Trinidad, would you pay him any mind? I won't pay him any mind. This is how I see that crazy tariff structure last week. But here is where I want to end more importantly. We in the Caribbean have to recognize that we are not fighting the American people. So we should avoid all talks of boycott and all of that stuff, right? We're not fighting the American people. We have friends, we have families over there, yes? We are not fighting the American consumer. We're not fighting the American producer. In fact, the American producers and consumers are actually fighting the craziness of their own government as we speak, yes? So we need to be in solidarity with them, be watchful. Our business people need to reach out to their partners in the United States and to find out where they are and what plans they have in place, because we knew something was coming. We didn't know it would be this crazy, but we knew something was coming. And I do believe that businesses would have made certain moves months ago, weeks ago, in expectation of something happening. Not this crazy. I don't think anyone saw this, but moves were made. That's where I would end.
Thank you for your time and insight, Dr. Braithwaite.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
When we return, it's your market trend segment.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Welcome back. While the U.S. market took a downturn this week, markets in and around the region saw shares traded and some stability. It's now time for your market trends this week. The Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange recorded a total of 4,778 put-through transactions valued at $355,493.25 for the week ending April 4th. Market indices saw declines ranging from 2.94% to 2.21% and an increase by 0.07%. Overall, trade activity for the week involved 25 securities. 6 advanced, with Unilever Caribbean Limited increasing by 6% and Antimacal Limited by 3%. There were declines in 11 securities, the largest being One Caribbean Media decreasing by 8.08% and National Flour Mills by 7.27%. The remaining 8 securities traded firm. The Barbados Stock Exchange reported a total volume of 95,705 shares traded on the regular market at a value of $182,646 Barbadian dollars for this week. The fixed income market recorded 5,000 shares traded at $80 Barbadian dollars per share. Three top securities bought and sold were Goddard Enterprises Limited, Epley Caribbean Property Value Fund, and Epley Caribbean Property Development Fund, with volumes of shares at 55,024, 22,000, and 15,571 respectively. Emera Deposit Receipt, Epley Caribbean Property Value Fund, and CIBC Caribbean Bank Limited were the three with advances. The remaining 24 shares traded firm for the week. Headed to Jamaica, where its stock exchange recorded a volume of 188,035,932 shares, valued at over 1,589,370,537 Jamaican dollars and 12 cents, traded for this week ending April 4th. The leading three companies were Trans Jamaican Highway Limited, Whiton Energy Limited, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial. A total of 64 stocks were traded for the week, in which 15 advanced, 39 declined, and 10 traded firm. Palace Amusement Company Limited and Bridger Paints Jamaica Limited saw the highest advances at 13% and 12.45% respectively. Jamaica Public Service Company Limited plummeted the most by 24.88%, as well as Cygnus Credit Investments 10% preference shares by 14.85%. Turning to the Eastern Caribbean securities market, which reported a total of 12,481 shares, traded at a value of 27,167 ECD dollars and 81 cents for this week. TDC Limited captured the market with over 87% of the market shares traded for the week, with a grand total of 10,900 shares bought and sold. St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank Limited and Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines received the second and third highest amount of shares, traded at 347 and 337 respectively. A total of 7 securities were traded, of which 1 declined by 6.7% and 6 remain unchanged. Our regional business players maintaining their value on the stock market. Up next, your This Week in History segment. Stay with us.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
This Week in History, we go back to 1990, when the Guyana sugar workers protested wages for a lengthy period of time, affecting trade with European markets. In 1990, Guyana's sugar industry experienced a 2-day strike, with the Guyana Agriculture and General Workers Union and Guy-Suco Guyana Sugar Corporation facing ongoing disputes. Production had dropped to 130,000 tons from the 164,000 target set, with tax after profit totaling 35.7 million Guyana dollars that year. With rain affecting the crop, the corporation was unable to meet its quota for the European Economic Community (EEC). Employee strikes were said to have stemmed from disputes over wages and particularly the annual production incentive API. At the time, Ghana's sugar industry was facing significant challenges, including declining production and economic pressures, while there were issues in the management of the company, which saw the changes in chairman in a short period of time. The late 1980s and early 1990s were a period of economic difficulty for Guyana, as the government was working to reform the sugar industry, including engaging with international firms like Booker Tate. The need to devalue the Guyanese dollar to allow for better wages for the sugar workers became apparent, with the 1990 sugar workers' strike going down in history as a manifestation of the economic hardships and labor disputes that plagued Guyana's vital sugar industry during that period. Guy-Suco financial reports for the year 1990 would later show that employees would get a wage increase to 75 Guyanese dollars per day by October, with strikes for the year accounting for 23.3 million Guyanese dollars in losses, while $613 million were spent in salaries for 25,500 Guy-Suco employees. The struggles faced at the labor front and the impacts had on commodities and lives. We pause for a few short messages at this time. Stay tuned.
We want you to advertise with us. Join us as the premier business magazine and news outlet covering the Caribbean. Contact us today at 868-783-5094.
Well, thanks for joining us this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Carib Money Report. Like us on social media and follow us for more. I am Kimberly Ram Kalwan. See you next week.